T. Man, leading Emmy, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to Emmy TV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Man, the Encourager.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable.
TV Podcast. Today, this first part of the day, we'll be talking to Dr. Hill. The second part, we'll be talking daddies and daughters with Crystal Gunn and Heather Miller. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ural, how you doing, Doc?
Great. How you doing, Brother Calvin? Man.
Oh, man, I'm just the good father.
Of the good fathers only. Good to see you, brother.
Yes, sir, man. I got kidnapped, so I'm up here in the Rapids, and with some high school classmates and everything, man. So I wanted to make sure that we continue to do stay consistent. And so, Dr. Hill, as we do on Fatherhood Unity Month and have done, I'm excited to have you because I know this is going to be a story that many will learn from. And so, with that being said, my biggest statement to you is please share your fatherhood story.
All right. You have been trying to get this fatherhood story out of me forever. And I have ducked you, and I've moved from side to side as a professional and share. But let me share some professional things. But I wanted to start with that poem by Khalil Gibran because it really sets the tone for my fatherhood story. Khalil Gibran was born in 1883, and he's a Lebanese poet and artist, and he's a creative and visual artist and a writer. He wrote that poem inside of a book called The Prophet, which was written in 1925. And that's one of those timeless writings. He says that your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. And at 60 years of age, I can attest to the fact that that's been my experience. I have made youth my mission, and I have been a father to many, in different ways. All right. I wrote my doctoral dissertation 20 years ago on mentoring African American males at Clark Atlanta University as I earned my PhD, and I spent 10 years traveling the country looking at the best mentoring models. And in those travels, I actually picked up mentoring African American males from my dad, who was a great mentor. And I've already told my dad's story. My dad, Ural Hill Sr., and he has a mentor. But the mentoring and the fathering goes back several generations. Beyond my father, and my middle name is Haywood, Ural Haywood Hill. I was named after my great uncle Hayward as well, who was a pastor. And my great grandfather on my mother's side was a pastor. And these are the fathers of Africans in America. The fathers in Africa are the chiefs, the Babas. They call them Babas. And so what we brought to America when we started slave religion on the plantations, when we chose a pastor, we were really choosing a chief of the tribe. All right. Somebody who would be a father to the whole tribe. And that's what a pastor is. And I find myself a pastor now. I can tell my individual fatherhood story, but it really feeds more into this poem that Khalil Gibran wrote. And that's the fact that your children, I think too many people try to make their children like them, or they try to raise their children like they were raised, exactly like they were raised. And every generation is different. And every child is created by God and born as a child of God and has a purpose to fulfill. And as my father taught me, the most important thing you can do in raising a child is help them find out what their purpose is and what turns their lights on, and keep those lights on and helping them move toward what their calling is here on this earth. The Bible says, before you were formed in your mother's belly, I knew thee, in the book of Jeremiah. And so God knows, and that's what Khalil Gibran is speaking to in a universal language. God knows what we came here to do. And our job as parents is to help that child find out what they came here to do and support that in a loving environment and a stable environment. That's what he says at the end. God loves a stable bow so that they can get their bearings and then be shot into the universe so that they can achieve their goals. So that's my introduction. And now I'll get into my story. If you want to interject or ask any questions on what I just said, I'll share. But I can get into my story now if you like.
No, that's exactly what I want you to do.
Okay.
Because I think your story is a very powerful story.
Yes. Well, again, raised by a father who was a mentor to many. So I was raised around these other kids my dad was mentoring as I grew up. Not only my two brothers. I have one brother who was my father's son from a previous marriage, and then another brother who grew up in the house with me, with my mom. And Stephen Ray Hill, my older brother, and then my younger brother, because I grew up like the oldest. I didn't meet Stephen Ray Hill until I was 18. But John Hill is my younger brother. But I got married at a very early age. I got married right out of college to a young woman. I'm a Q, and I married a Delta straight out of the blocks. I graduated from college in '83 and married a woman, and that marriage didn't last but 6 months. All right. And to be very honest, and Michael Underwood, he was born outside of that marriage. In other words, we got married. We were married for 6 months, and I didn't know it at the time when I married Mike's mother. She had lived with a guy for 3 years before we got together. We had a whirlwind circumstance, and they had unfinished business. And so they ended up having a child that following year, and that's Michael Underwood. And so I ended up helping raise that marriage didn't last for 2 years between her and Michael Underwood. And I ended up reaching back to Jan Lewis years later when he was about 18 or 19, and he didn't know who his father was. And I ended up being a surrogate father for Michael. And Michael was at what we call a change point in his life. He was at a milestone. He had just had a hard breakup in a marriage, an engagement. And he said, well, if you could help me with my spiritual life, because I was already ordained at that point, he said, that would be great. So he pledged Kappa, and I'm a Q. He was pledging Kappa when I met him. And I bought him all this paraphernalia for Kappa Alpha Psi, and I started mentoring him, and I helped him find his wife, and I did his premarital counseling with he and his current wife, and they have a son named Caden, and I was there as the surrogate granddad when Caden was born, and we're still, family to this day. And Jan spoke at that conference that you came to. We flew her in to speak. She was a college president at that time. And so that was my first real fatherhood experience as it wasn't my bio son, but through the Spirit, I worked with him. And Mike was a brilliant kid. He's always been brilliant. He's a health and fitness guy. He and his wife. She got into it. They both have MBAs, and he has a master's in public health administration. And they're doing very well in California. Lil Caden is playing football, and they all wear red all the time, and that's okay with me. But anyway, the longest short of it is that was the first. And you remember, as I was building a relationship with him back when he was 19 or something. He's like,
right.
Yeah, that's 15 years ago. And so, and Mike, we talk all the time through Facebook. And so that was my first son. Then I got married. And I married this woman, and she, Melanie Campbell. And Melanie and our children were children of the civil rights movement. The one who introduced me to that poem was Reverend James Orange, who was a lieutenant of Dr. King. And I met Melanie at Morris Brown at the student government office. I met her in 3 places in one day. The Southern Christian Leadership headquarters at Morris Brown, and then in the Atlanta University Center Library. I got 2 degrees from Clark, and Melanie had graduated from Clark, Atlanta, and she was a political activist, and she was working on Maynard Jackson's campaign, his second mayoral campaign. And I was running around down there, and I was all of a sudden the president of a national Collegiate Black Caucus, a national youth organization, which was the student arm of the Congressional Black Caucus. And so I had all these student government presidents who were under my wing as we decided to march on Washington. June 17, 1990, we took 10,000 students to Washington, and we were all the HBCU student government presidents. And those were our children. Those were the ones that we brought along. Those were the ones we mentored. As a matter of fact, Stacey Abrams was one of those students, and brother Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, was one of those students. So we had students across the country, and our job was to mentor them and engage them and teach them. Stacey became the 3rd president of that organization. And they were Morehouse students, Clark Atlanta students. We had students all over, and we traveled from campus to campus. Now, Melanie and I got married, and how I got this poem was Reverend Orange read this at our wedding at Ebenezer Baptist Church. I was licensed and trained and ordained at Ebenezer. And Coretta Scott King was like a second mom to me. And so we were children of the movement, and our job was to raise children of the movement. Now, Melanie and I got married. Melanie never had a child by me. She had a miscarriage, unfortunately, and it was painful. But we were married for 10 years, and we organized. And Melanie is now the executive director of the National Coalition of Black Voter Participation in Washington, D.C. She just gave $1 million to Clark Atlanta University to set up a leadership center. She's still doing, we're both still doing that work. And we watched these children that we had of the movement all over the country. So being a father, being a baba, being the older guy, we were like 10 years older than those students then. And so that was how we started. So then the next one was, then I got married in 2003. Again, Melanie and I kind of drifted apart, and we, you know, and we were together for 10 years. And then in 2003, I got married again, and that lasted for a year. And when I married Tanya, Tanya was a sheriff, a Washington County. I mean, she was a Fulton County sheriff in Atlanta. And I said I wasn't going to get married again until I finished my PhD. I said, I'm not getting married again.
Right.
So, because I said, I got to have the money. And I got to, you know, money won't get in the way anymore.
Right.
So I was focused on that, laser focus. And I was, you know, and again, now all during this time before I married Tanya, I was at Morehouse. And I became a baba, a father of many young men. I was a dorm director. And so I had 100 black males living in my dorm. So I was a dorm father. And so those young men all over the country now, and I watch them, all of the things they're doing. I got them, you know, the mayor of Birmingham was one of my students. And one of them is a correspondent for CBS, and I watch him. The other guy is you know, I got a pastor of Newburgh, Jamal Bryant was one of my students. And when you are at Morehouse, those guys do amazing things. And so I have all these students that I've seen pastor, lead organizations, do amazing political things. And you keep those relationships.
Right.
And so you become a father of those guys. And as they go through life, they come to you. And you help them along the way. So we were making preachers. I was working with Dean Carter. He's the real Baba down there at Morehouse of all those preachers, the dean of the chapel. And I was assistant to the dean of the chapel there, a dorm director, and then later in the counseling center as a counselor. And so you see these generations, and I was there for 16 years. And so I decided after I got the PhD, I was going to get married. So I got married. Married Tanya. Tanya was a sheriff. She was tough. I called her Annie Oakley. Tanya could outshoot all the men. And she had a son named Chris, and his name is Chris Crowder. And Chris already had a son, so I became a grandfather when I married her. And when I married her, all of a sudden I had a 4-year-old grandson, Little Chris, we called him, Chris Jr. And he had a son at an early age. He was only 19 then, and I think he was 19 and his son was 4 years old. And all of a sudden I had that little guy, Little Chris, with me all the time. Whatever I did, he wanted to do. And I believe my hair all turned gray the moment he said Granddaddy Ural. He said Granddaddy Ural, and my hair just turned gray. But anyway, I'm now a great grandfather through him. He has a son. He's only 22, and he's got a son. But Chris wanted to go into the armed services. That was a military family. His grandfather had been in the military. His mom had served 6 years in the Army. His uncles had served. And so Chris, when I married his mom, he went into the war in Iraq in 2003. And he signed up full-time. He was already in the reserves, and he signed up full-time and went into the Marine Corps. And I was a baba for him because he didn't have a relationship with his dad. And so now all of a sudden, he became a son of mine. And again, helped him through, as he decided on a wife, helped him to choose a wife, and did counseling with his wife, Melanie. And they have now 4 kids. And so maintain, even though the relationship between his mom and I didn't last for but a year, the relationship with the family, they said, we're not going to let you go. And Tanya also came and participated as a board member of Hotel. And so what I ended up doing, my organization, I do a lot of family therapy. I took my mess and turned it into my message. I focused on family therapy because as I studied African-American males, I realized the biggest challenge was the Black family. It wasn't just the males, it was the family.
It was the family.
It was crisis in the family.
Yes.
So I started, I started really focusing on doing marriage and family therapy for the Black family. So I formed this organization called Healing Ourselves Through Excellence and Preparation, HOTEP, which means peace. Healing ourselves through excellence and preparation. And I did it with Jan and Tanya and Melanie's help. All of them sat on the board as we formed it. So I had all my ex-wives sitting on this board together because I realized that in order for me to be whole, I had to go back and make peace with them. And as I made peace with them and the children, then I was at peace. All right. And they were the ones that encouraged me to get married again. So as we formed this organization, and the organization started, I was offered a teaching position at Texas Southern University. And so to teach counseling to master's and doctoral students, to teach my method. So after 16 years at Morehouse, I go to Texas Southern. And I'm connected, and we're forming Hotel. And we said, let's bring together pastors, mental health practitioners, physicians, and educators for community change. And let's have them sit together on a panel and talk about things from their own disciplines and bring them together. And that's the conference you came to. The first one of those was in 2008. And we had people of different professions speaking on issues of concern to the Black community. Jan was at that one. The next one in 2009, Tanya participated in. All right. And then in 2010, you had Randy or Miranda, my wife that the best.
Right.
So in 2010, at a Hotel conference, I got married again. And Miranda and I married for 10 years. And that poem on children, now she had, at that time, I had Chris and I had Mike and I had the grandkids coming. And she had 3 children. And she had been married before, obviously. Had 3 children. And by this point, we're at 626. So those 3 kids, Chris, Andrew, and Megan, have done very well. But I had that philosophy in place that poem speaks of by that point. I realized that they were not mine to make like me, but to help them find their special gift and their purpose and move toward it. At this point, Megan has graduated from Michigan. Andrew is a freshman at Michigan with a 3.9 grade point average. He's in his sophomore year now. Christopher is in his senior year with a 3.4 grade point average. They've been great athletes. They performed well in their high schools, and they've done well in life. And Miranda and I are writing together and working together. And as long as you allow, and I'll close with this poem. We need a hard stop right now at 626.
Yeah, but go ahead and hit the point.
Okay, I'm gonna hit this last poem. And this is the message I would give. Not that first poem was on children. Let children be themselves. In other words, raise them up within a framework. You need a square to stand on.
Right.
And when I say a square, I mean like the Bible or like the Quran or like some square that you're standing on with principles, universal principles of love and ethics and faith. But then with marriage, here's what I would tell people at this point. You shouldn't have to give up yourself. You shouldn't have to give up yourself to be loved by somebody else. This is Khalil Gibran's poem on marriage. And I'll close with this. The Amitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. You shall be together even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving between the shores of your soul. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Give one another your bread, but eat not from the same loaf, and sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. Even as the stirrings of the lute are alone, each string of the lute is alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow."
Well, Dr. Hill,
God bless.
amen.
God bless you. Hey, Heather.
Hey, man, I want to tell you, you know, and I'm glad to hear that you writing that book. I often tell you that your story is very, very impactful. You know, in some ways, you know, I can be silly, but I think the work that you have done is very, very powerful, and I will continue to encourage you to produce that book. And you know, for me, I love you. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on
Oh,
and
okay.
and,
Let
and
me
keep up
well
that
let me
good
say
work.
this. Let me say this to you because I told Calvin. I said after this year, this is my book. This is Let Us Make. Yeah, this is Let Us Make Men. This is Let Us Make Men, and this is my book about raising African American males. And this comes from my doctoral dissertation, which is that 10 years of work. And there's a picture, as a matter of fact, of Chris and Andrew when I was coaching them in football on here up in Ann Arbor. But I told Kelvin that this next year I've been doing so many podcasts and speaking engagements and preaching. I said, but now I'm going to take a year and now I'm going to write that book about the Black family. All right, I'm going to focus on the family. I'm just going to take a year and discipline myself. And I appreciate you, Kelvin, from the time that we connected. You've always been supportive. You've been my brother and my friend, and we've been shoulder to shoulder in this movement. And I'm going to say, as I said in the first interview with you, encourage me. I'm young.
All right, Doc.
All right, now. God
I
bless you.
appreciate you. You
All
too.
right. All right. You too, sister. Good to see you again. All right.
Yeah.
Too.
All right. God bless.
So that was awesome, and um, just a great story and testimony. I don't know who that is breathing heavy, but it's really coming through the mic, right?
Just
so,
in case.
so welcome, ladies, welcome, and I appreciate you coming on. This segment is about dads and daughters, and you guys are most definitely um, important, and we needed you all to be involved today. So I don't know how you guys want to start, but each one of you have a story. So you know, we'll start with Crystal, and then we'll work our way. And then Dave is a girl dad, and today my daughter made me so proud. So I'm a girl dad today. So you know, maybe I could throw a couple of pennies in there, but you know, we'll start with you, Crystal. Share your moment. What is it you'd like to share being a girl dad and a daddy's daughter?
Daddy's daughter. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Um, it's it's nothing like it. I will say that. My dad passed in 2017 and the heartbreak is very real and still here. But what he instilled in me is interesting story. I push, we all have, we go through these excuses as to why we not doing something, why we're not doing that thing that we're called to do, right? And like a month or so after he passed, it was almost like he was sitting in a room with me and he asked me, so now what? You have no more excuses, right? I'm not here. You're not coming to sit with me to help take care of me. What's your excuse now? And it was it was in that aha moment, right? And it was in constantly hearing his voice that I had to jump back in and go to work. So I, I, you all hear me talk about my mother and how she is the original amazing woman, but seriously, without my dad, I don't, I can't say it enough how important that relationship between that daughter and that father really is, right? every single day I hear his voice. Every single day, I strive to make him proud, and I don't know where I would be without him.
You know, that's the wonderful thing about parenting. You know, I share my story briefly. You know, I lost my dad at 24. Then I turned around and lost my mom at 30. And the one thing that I said that coincide with what you said is suddenly all of the stories, all of the information that they're giving you, you begin to hear every one of those lessons, those moments, that information. And so I always say you gained an angel,
For sure.
for sure. That you gained an angel because that connection, it is forever. You always had these little moments, right? But I say that to say that's exactly it. That's the outcome. Go get on that horsey. I specifically told my brother, I'll never forget it. Hey, I got to go become someone to tell her story.
Right.
And here I
Right.
am. You know, here I am.
Yeah.
So, um, Heather,
Thank you. Hi, Dave. Hi, J Boog. I know you're in the studio. Good day, Crystal. Good to see you all and sharing this awesome thought around being a daddy's girl. Um, I started out that way. I started out as a daddy's girl. I have four sisters, three by my dad by birth, and one was grafted into our family who was a cousin who was also raised as a daddy's girl. And there are a couple of things that you said, Crystal, that I think ring true for daddy's girls. One is nothing like it. It's nothing like having access to your dad and a dad that pours into you and sets the standard for what you see manhood, fatherhood, parenting to be through his lens. And I've had lots of stories. My dad was always my dad, was always my protector, always my teacher, but he also became my friend when I started to understand a lot more, and my dad started to share his truth with me about a lot of things. Like I would always ask him about stuff that happened as a kid. Like, well, what did you mean about when this thing happened? Like I recall that the biggest fight that I had with my father was that he had told me that I couldn't go to a sleepover over my friend's house, and he hadn't met my friend. He hadn't met their family, which was a requirement for my parents for us to do anything with anybody. They had to first meet your friend, and they had to meet their family, their parents. And so it was a big deal. I was in high school, and I really wanted to go to sleepover, and my father said no. And I just kept asking him why. And he thought at the time, and I thought at the time, he just thought that I was trying to be smart with him and be disrespectful. And I kept telling him, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just want to understand your answer. And and so I asked him a couple of times. He warned me. He said, "You need to stop asking me that, or I'm gonna smack you." And I said, I just want to know why. And I kept saying it. He smacked me. I said it again. He smacked me again. I mean, he was correcting me, and I get that, but it didn't stop me from asking the question. And so my dad eventually he thought I was just really being defiant, and he walked away. So I brought that up to him, some years ago to have that conversation. I said, Dad, I said, I was never trying to be disrespectful to you. I really wanted to understand your answer. And when my father responded, he said, I did not have the tools at the time to tell
Mm.
you that I was afraid for you to be somewhere where I wasn't able to protect you, and I didn't know them. And he said, I didn't have the tools to tell you that
mm,
that's what I was thinking and feeling at the time. He said it was kind of that position, like, because I said so, but because it
Mm-hmm.
was something that was important, I just really wanted to understand what it was. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. And so when I shared that with him, we both kind of sat there with tears in our eyes because he was like, well, I knew you weren't disrespectful. He said, but he said it wasn't any more I could do. I couldn't say anything more at the time. And for him to be able to share that truth with me at that time meant, wow, meant a cardinal in the background to me.
Right.
Crystal, did you get that? Did you hear
I
that?
did. I got it. I was here. I was listening. Like, okay, wait. We have a fourth. I mean, a fifth guest.
Oh
Which is
yeah.
very fitting, is
That
it not? You
it is extremely fitting.
Right. And so if those of you who know Crystal and I, you know that cardinals are our spiritual connections to those loved ones who have made their transition. So, and I know that that cardinal for Crystal is representation of her father. And so that's
Absolutely.
awesome. So awesome. But I think the relationship between a father and his daughter, and that is whether that daughter is grafted into his family as his daughter, his biological daughter. I think the relationship between the father and daughter has so much rich soil, and as Calvin is always talking about the nutrients of a healthy relationship, because the relationship that you have with your father is part of what sets the tone for your relationship with the men in your life. Something around, I mean, not just something, but some tools around the expectations that you have, and some tools around what you see in terms of potential men, or those who you want to share any real space or time with. I think if you don't see those mirrors, or if you don't see those traits represented in your father in them, I think it has less of a chance of being an effective and healthy vision of a relationship too. Because you have to have some standard and expectation. I think that's healthy.
Yeah, it most definitely is, and that's the where we have to break up teaching males certain things and teaching females certain things. These are things that, like listening to both of you guys' story, it only provides the truth of what we talk about when we talk about how important dads are, how valuable they are, right? Because it sets, when you have a dad included in your life, it sets a certain strength in your walk. It's a certain strength that you cannot, like, people like, well, it is most definitely something different about you. You see what I'm saying? So, and then when you go and try to get that conversation and understanding, I've had a dad, and a dad that was very present and providing more than just a paycheck, right? And so
Right.
that's the strength that oozes from both of you guys, right? Is that strength? Crystal, what's on your mind?
Because Heather just said that piece, and it just dawned on me, like watching my dad and my mom in their relationship and how my dad operated really has set a standard in all of my relationships throughout my past. And my father was someone who, um, people would say when my father spoke, you would always lean in, right? Because he wasn't going to raise his voice. He didn't speak until he really had something to say, and that value. And watching how he interacted with my mom, and one of my biggest pet peeves is the way people speak to one another, right? And you cannot speak to me disrespectfully, and it never really dawned on me until Heather just said what she said as to where that imprint came from, and it was watching my dad.
Yeah, yeah, that's very, very important. Dave?
Hi, Dave.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good. Hey, everyone. How's everybody doing? You
Hi,
know,
We're
Dave.
I
good.
see everybody from this angle. I didn't know y'all was movie stars, but it's all good. I'm like, hey, this is a new angle. I already know Calvin's, like a star because, we do this. But I didn't get to see you guys play something in living color. So, yeah, I think what you guys have presented is significant. I was sitting there, I did a show not too long ago, last week actually, and I was saying the importance of a father. It was so important that Jesus decided, God decided before Jesus was born that he would give him an earthly father. You know, he was a Jesus father, right? But you know,
Right.
a physical father into the picture. That wasn't the father of Jesus from a physical standpoint. So right then, he had showed us how important a father was. Now it comes down, you know, I'm not a daddy's girl, so therefore we had to change this up, right? Right. That being said, I know the importance of a relationship. I had two daughters. One has gone on to glory, but the second one, who a little different, because she has cerebral palsy. She's 28 and she's like a 9-month old. And I remember a conversation with her mom who said that I don't understand. You can go away for 2 years and come back, and she still treats you the same way. But I used the analogy of a man told me I had a chow, and I said, I'm going to get me a dog. And he said, now I know you're like, well, how does it relate? You'll see. So he said, I'm going to get me a dog, right? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, you're not getting a dog, you're getting a present. And I was like, what? You know, I was a young fella, so I was like, what? Okay, you know, I got my dog, right? But I started to acknowledge before he had transitioned, the man himself, before he transitioned to God, I started to understand what he meant. When my dog transitioned himself at 13, I realized in fullness what he meant by a presence. Because when that presence was gone, it devastated me. Now, when I walk in the house, where's that presence? Not the physical body showing up, but where's that presence? Because he could be down in the basement, but I knew he was there. So my kid's mom, as I told her, I said, it's my presence. She doesn't talk. She doesn't walk. She's into a feeding tube. You think of anything that's important to you in your physical existence, actually, she don't have it. But when I come in that room, she get to kick in, she get to move, and she gets all excited. Just the idea say, your daddy here. Now again, those two words are only "oh God" and "good God." Those are the only words she can say. Now, that being said, when I come in there and she does what she do, I say it's my presence. From the day she came out of the womb, my presence has been there. And I put an
Blessing.
interest into my child and was my son and my other daughter. So I didn't necessarily want to be a father in the interim, not because I didn't like kids, but I'm the oldest child. And man, I tell you, growing up in the 60s, as you were talking about your father, you do as I say, and that's a lot. So the cleaning, everything. By the time I was 8, what we're teaching now, I was already doing just like that. Because my parents say, my mother specifically said, you will be able to do everything a woman do but carry a baby. So I can do it all. I can cook, sew, iron. So when I went in the army, I told them, oh, yeah, my mother put y'all to shame. Because she prepared me to do what I need to do. So, but that balance, I believe, is so important to have a father, as you said earlier, to set an image, to set a standard. I'm sure that if my daughter had the capacity to do what everybody else here is talking about, she would tell the story like my son. Because I just had a conversation with my kid's mom just an hour ago, and she got infuriated when my son went to defend me about a situation. And I said, I let him talk, then I stopped him, and I began to defend you and say, we all contribute to this relationship. But at the same time, he understood the significance where she would not give me the credit because in her moment of frustration, irritability, whatever the case, he was able to see the importance of me, the baby, and not the bathwater. You know, and I think that's what's so important. The presence of a father and what he contributes to a daughter does set the precedent for what she's going to look for later. But when y'all first started, all I kept thinking about, he can't give you what he don't have. And what we heard was Crystal saying, my father, so I didn't have the tools. See, sometimes we make an ideal about an image of a father based on, I'll just say father knows best, some ideal, Bill Cosby or whatever. But these are images created. And if you don't have the tools, that's why Bill Cosby could create that image, because he had the tools. But prior to that, we had a different father called James Evans. That was the tools he had as a father. But yet his daughter loved him. She loved her daddy. That was the image. A poor man trying to do the best he can. That's where we come from. That's how it did. But when you move the generation on and you get a Cosby, rich, doctor, lawyer doing his thing, there's a new image. So what did those daughters do? Proceed to go to college and do the thing because there was a model. So your father set that up. I can't speak the way you guys are speaking because my daughter can't tell it. All I can tell you is my presence makes a difference in her life.
No question.
It did.
It does. No question. Heather, what's on your mind?
Well, there were moments I think that were like key, impactful moments. So my dad, he was the provider in our family, in our household. My mom was in school. She was raising the family. They had agreed on the roles that they would play and raising family. Um, but I just want to share this one memory. And this was actually the memory from my youngest sister. So there are 10 years between me and my baby sister. And my sister was born premature. And my mom had a C-section. And so after my mom had my baby sister, and she spent her time in the hospital, in those days you stayed a little bit longer when you had a procedure like that. Now they'll put you out in a minute. But so my mom had to go home. And my dad, at the time, I believe we didn't have a car. My dad was working. My dad would take the bus on his lunch break and go to the hospital to feed my sister. He did that every day faithfully. And then on his way home from work, he would go again and stay a few hours with my baby sister and feed her. And he did that until she came home from the hospital, which was probably around another 7 or 8 weeks that she had to stay in the hospital, and maybe even longer than that. But he did that routinely and faithfully every day. Rain, snow, sleet, nothing stopped him from being there and being there to spend time with her. And to this day, when my dad passed away this past May, she is still taking it and she is still completely devastated by it. But my the way that I am dealing with my grief is that I celebrate my dad. I'm not sad. His presence definitely, like you mentioned, Dave, is definitely missed, but it's so much richness in my thoughts of him and my memories of him. It's no room for me to be sad. It's no room for me to feel that way. If I want to talk to him, I open my mouth and I talk to him. If I want to feel
Absolutely.
him, I open up my heart to feel him. If I want to see him, I open up my pictures, my photo albums. I have lots of memories. I can look anywhere. It doesn't matter where I am, and I can see my father and I can connect with him. And that's so important to me. And I think that is from having a relationship. And so I had a relationship with my father. I got to know him as a human being and not just a parent. As I got older, knowing him as a human being became more important to me. Like, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What motivates you? What books do you like? I know my father's favorite poet is Khalil Gibran. I know that um, I know his favorite poems, and we added those to his obituary. I knew the things that mattered to him. I know that my father prayed for the band of angels around his family and his loved ones. And I know now that my dad is one of those angels that is looking out,
Absolutely.
guiding, and protecting his family, his friends, and his loved ones. My dad was loyal to those he loved. He stood up for what he believed in. He had values. And I feel the same way. I believe those are the things that I connect with him most on. And that's where I get my strength to do what I do every day, is because I had a good example of what strength looked like and what it means to be loyal and what it means to be have faith and what it means to put your gifts into practice. Because my dad insisted on it. He insisted that we give our best, we do our best, and then we expand who we were. He did not expect us to be one dimensional beings. And because he wasn't, he had that expectation for us too.
Wow. Crystal?
It's amazing how when I spoke at my dad's service, I talked about him being my real life superhero, and how after he transitioned, he became my spiritual superhero. Still working, still teaching, still uplifting and empowering. And, things start to happen. And sometimes I just have to say, thank you, Dad, because I know it's him doing what he does. And then to be able to watch just the love between he and my mom, like it's when he was in hospice the first time, it was like my mom would be there during the day and I would go after work. And one day I got there and she had been sitting on the bed. She got up, so I sat on the bed with him. And it was almost like she couldn't wait for me to get back up so she could sit back on the bed with him. And I was like, okay, well, And so it was just that love and you know, watching the different stages of love throughout their relationship, right? Because then when you're taking care of somebody when they're ill, that love looks totally different than when you're taking care of them and they're well, right? And so, it clearly sets that standard. And I'm grateful that not only I got to see that, but my daughter had an opportunity to see that. And although my daughter's father, who's my ex-husband, although we divorced, it was very, very important to both of us that we still had a good relationship so she could see that, right? Um, that we were still a family, even though we weren't all under the same roof, even, anymore. And is divorce hard? Absolutely. But I think because, again, of the standards that we set, right? You can see that show up in my daughter as she now dates at 20. So that presence of your dad is nothing like it. And I'm so grateful.
So grateful.
So grateful.
Go ahead, Dave.
Real fast. So that solidifies what the presence meant when the man told me that. See, the presence is not a physical existence. It's the existence that lives inside of you that we're all in different locations, but there's a presence. And
Right.
this is as y'all continue to talk, that presence that's established and put in you lives with you like God. You can't see God, but his presence is with us all the time. That's why I say I learned that big lesson from that guy about what the presence of a person, in this case, he was telling me about a dog, but it was much deeper than that. So
For sure.
again, you guys emphasize it. It just reiterates to me that our men and new fathers' presence is so significant. Thank you.
So, thank you, ladies. Thank you, Dave. So, when you evaluate um, the word father, um, and you take that word and you stretch it across a legacy, there are so many components that has gone into that word, and that word resonates so high. What is today and what is happening, as we saw yesterday on Father's Day, I saw people who didn't have fathers years before suddenly have fathers. My timeline was full of people who started acknowledging and talking about their father. And so it was just something that stayed in with me and in me on how important that really is. And so then we talk about God our Father. Then, just as Dave just so beautifully placed, the earthly father for Jesus, who, again, here's another situation where we don't acknowledge our father as much as we should. Because the father is the beginning of the teaching and the guiding of the tool. But here's what fathers also represents: life. The more you have access to your dads, the longer your life, the longer you live. I'm often looking at many, started the movement 2004, but land shirts with kids was getting killed. But guess what? The missing ingredients was, and every time I asked, they were absent of a dad. And then that's what turned me into going to look even further. What does it look like? Why is this happening? Where can I get this information? And the research kept showing up time and time and time again. Kids need both parents.
They
And
do.
they need their fathers, because their fathers represents an ingredients that no one else can boast. When your dad is in your life from birth to 9, the child lives longer. And we have been removing dads from kids' lives long before they even have a chance to get that nutritional factor of fatherhood. So, with that being said, that's why all our work is geared toward the restoration of families. That's why I'm in this lane: boys, men, husbands, and fathers. That's why you're in your lane for amazing women. That's why you're in your lane for helping women. And that's why you're in this lane with me and helping men be better and fathers. This is our work. I love you all. I appreciate you. This has been a very powerful half hour, probably one of our most powerful half hours since we've been doing it. I thank you for sharing your stories about your dads. We all must understand, no matter how we look at it, everything begins with dad. Dad carries the seed. The seed is then planted. The womb gives life. Together, we mold a child and make them whole. My name is Calvin Mann. God bless you and encourage me. I'm Young. Peace.
Second part of my life, I live with my grandmother. She used to cook me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She told me keep my head inside, yeah, be a winner. My great grandpa Steve used to take me school shopping and out to dinner. Yeah, I remember them family barbecues, cruising around Bella Park, tasting my favorite Aunt Patricia and car. She used to sit me and my cousins together and tell us we ain't cousins, we really brother. It's a blessing. Now that we grown, we tougher than leather. Even if it go from bad to worse, we still where we hurt. Make sure my baby girl tight, and make sure that I have my first family first. Let's start the game over. Back to the way things were. It's all about the kids, so put your family first. Let's start the game over. Back to the way things were. It's all about the kids, so put your family first. Start the game over, it's in me. Days gives me motivation, so I'm rocking my hand. Listen, don't have a wish. Let them know it's more to life than block living. Focus on yourself and stop all that hate. I know you want that money, but you gotta be patient. No matter which way you do, your heights, college graduation, living the life. Everyday money making. I wanna take it back to Sunday dinner. Remember collard greens and fried chicken. Remember grandma hands posted up in the kitchen. I'm sitting at the dining room table waiting to say my blessings. Now I feel like there's something is missing. It wasn't about taking, it was all about getting. Back in the days, they really knew how to live. Because everything they did was strictly for the kids.